Israeli forces have carried out more strikes across the Gaza Strip. It's the latest violation of the ceasefire agreed with Hamas in October. The latest attacks hit Gaza City's El Samir neighbourhood. Emergency services say at least 11 Palestinians were injured, and some of the victims are in critical condition. Hind Hurari is in Gaza City for us. And Hind, the rain may have eased, but the Israeli strikes are relentlessly continuing.
Definitely, the Israeli breaches and violations to the ceasefire continues, where the Israeli forces struck a car in the Gaza City in a Samad area, and this is a very busy area, which is more of like downtown, where the streets are busy, everyone's shopping in some markets, and that's why at least 11 Palestinians were injured in this attack. Now, according to the Israeli military, they said that this attack was an artillery shell and it was by mistake. Now, doctors at Al Ahli Hospital are saying that most of those injured are in serious critical condition. And this is not the first time where the Israeli forces continue to violate the ceasefire. There were multiple times where the Israeli forces continue to strike different areas across the Gaza Strip. Now, what we also need to know is, yes, it's ceasefire, but the Israeli forces continue to demolish, to destroy, to attack residential houses beyond the yellow line, where the Israeli authorities and Israeli forces are now present and operating. So Palestinians hear explosions every now and then, and there is always a fear that this ceasefire is fragile and won't make it till the end.
Hind, thank you so much. We'll come back to you in just a moment. After 2 years of Israeli bombardment on Gaza, Palestinians are enduring freezing winter conditions in tents and weakened, bombed-out buildings. Civil defence teams say more than 17 residential buildings have completely collapsed in storms this month. Another 90 have partially collapsed, and there's concern more are at risk of caving in.
When we hear about a house collapsing on its residents because of the rain, we go to sleep feeling anxious because our house is also at risk of collapsing due to the rain. We fear for our children and our elderly from this situation.
The latest building to come down was in Al-Shati refugee camp. 6 members of a family, including 2 children, were rescued after the roof of their home caved in. Civil defence teams say about 90% of shelters in Gaza have been flooded. Thousands of families have lost their temporary shelters. Clothes, mattresses and blankets are all soaked.
All displacement camps are full. I live in a camp, but we cannot withstand the rain. The water floods our shelters. Where are we supposed to go live? We were forced to return to our destroyed home. Some people may end up living under staircases. We want to deliver our voice to all Arab countries to look at the situation in Gaza as a whole, not only at my personal situation.
At least 17 people have died, 4 of them children, as a result of the icy temperatures and unstable buildings. Despite the worsening conditions, Israel continues to block the entry of mobile homes and sustainable shelters. Let's go back to Hind Hurari now in Gaza City. And Hind, another night is approaching, almost unbelievably desperate conditions set to get even worse.
Well, we have been seeing Palestinian families since the early hours of the morning trying to prepare for the next couple of hours, where we're expecting rain and another windstorm and very low temperature. We saw them putting pile of sands surrounding their tents. We saw them trying to put more layers of plastic sheets. But again, all of these alternatives are very weak and fragile and won't protect the families from the storm that is coming. We're talking about buildings collapsing, where Palestinians are seeking refuge inside those buildings. Families do not have any options. They were looking for tents, for any mobile houses, for caravans, but the Israeli authorities continue to ban and to restrict all types of shelter and winter items to enter the Gaza Strip. It's not only the tent itself, the caravans. We're also talking about winter clothes, blankets, where families are saying that they're struggling to even give warmth to their children. Now, according to the civil defense teams, they said that at least 27,000 tents were destroyed, and there was no way to help those families because there is no tents available inside the Gaza Strip. So the emergency response is massive. What is available in the Gaza Strip is very, very little compared to the demand. But again, this winter storm and the winter in overall is another trauma for Palestinians, where it's more of a nightmare, actually.
Hind Hudari joining us from Gaza City. Thank you so much. Well, Jonathan Cricks is the Chief of Communication at UNICEF Palestine. I spoke to him earlier about the dire conditions people in Gaza are facing.
What we see is absolutely terrible because, those children that I met today in Khan Yunis, they have been displaced multiple times. When you're displaced, you're just moving with what you have on your back. And they live now in tents which have been flooded. I could see in the morning blankets which were like dripping water that people were trying to dry. And, most of those children, they have only 1 or 2 change of clothes. So it's extremely difficult for them to stay dry. Last night, temperature here was approximately 8 degrees Celsius. It's very cold. I mean, when you are only protected with a piece of tarpaulin, a piece of plastic like the one behind me, and you have the wind which is blowing, and you have 10, 15 centimeters of water, it's horrible. And we are very concerned, first of all, for children who are getting, who can suffer from hypothermia and potentially die. But we are also very concerned about the emergence of diseases, because the living conditions of the people who are living around me or in Khan Yunis, where I met them, is absolutely terrible. I met with one family. They had 4 children, including one little girl, Reem. She's 10-year-old. She has been injured during the war. She still has shrapnel in her little belly, and she's living in those conditions. So it's really, really difficult for those children to survive in this.
8 degrees is really cold, isn't it? Really, really cold. And you just mentioned there is hypothermia, and there is access to fresh water. But I guess this is also not just from bad weather, right? This is a complete lack of infrastructure. There is a completely collapsed healthcare system. And so how do you address those needs?
I mean, we are a humanitarian agency. What we're doing for the moment is really trying to bring as much support as we can to face our, I would say, the urgency. So in the past weeks, we've been able to bring 250,000 winter clothes kits with warm clothes, warm shoes, sweaters, etc. But it's 250,000 while we have 1 million children in the Gaza Strip. So you see, it's not enough. It's the same for the blankets. We have been able to distribute 500,000 or 600,000 blankets. We have been able to also distribute tents, 7,000, 8,000 tents. I don't know the latest figure, but it's around that ballpark figure. But once again, this is not enough. So this is what we're able to do for the moment. We need to bring more, but there is also a question of dignity and a question of quality or basic quality of life. I mean, you cannot live for months and months, for years in tents. There must be like prefabs or permanent structure that will be able to host those children so that they don't stand with their bare foot in the mud.
Jonathan, you talk about what needs to happen onwards from here, but in terms of a temporary solution, and you talk about the number of outfits you've been able to get in, or the tarps and the tents, what is the hold-up with getting more? Is it that you don't have the resources or the funding, or is there another hold-up specifically that means that these goods are not getting through?
So first, since the ceasefire, which is a very fragile and far from being perfect ceasefire, we have seen several strikes during the ceasefire, but we have been able to bring more. We have been able to bring more aid to the children and to the families. So that is definitely an improvement. But the problem is the scale of the needs. we have more than 2 million people. I was again in Khan Yunis today. A few days ago, I was in Gaza City. When you see the scale of the damages, the number of destroyed buildings, when you see the number of people living in tents with limited access to toilets, limited access to fresh water, also, for the most vulnerable families, limited access to food, with very little hospitals and healthcare system, because many hospitals have been damaged or destroyed. So the overall situation, the scale of the needs is so huge that we need to have way more entering in the Gaza Strip. But it's taking time, and it's taking a lot of efforts, and it's going to take definitely more time. But at the same time, we have children who are extremely cold at night today.
Israeli forces have carried out raids across the occupied West Bank. In Nablus, 4 Palestinians were wounded by Israeli gunfire, one of them seriously. Soldiers fanned out into the streets and stormed shops, pointing firearms at store owners and shoppers. Meanwhile, Israeli forces also stormed Jenin. Palestinian authorities closed schools in the city to ensure the safety of children. Israel has intensified its attacks in the occupied West Bank since October 2023. And Israel's advancing new illegal settlement plans in occupied East Jerusalem. The United Nations recognises the 1967 borders as the boundaries of the occupied West Bank. Israel has annexed Jerusalem and built illegal settlements in and around the city. In 2002, it started building a separation wall, cutting off occupied East Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank. The Israeli government's also advanced the E1 plan, which would connect the illegal settlements with annexed Jerusalem, cutting deeper into the occupied West Bank. On Wednesday, Israeli municipal officials are expected to push ahead with plans to establish a new illegal settlement of 9,000 units. Nida Ibrahim is in Kfar Akab at a site overlooking the separation wall and where the new settlement is planned.
This is part of what Palestinians go through under Israel's military occupation, specifically that these Israeli raids have been intensifying since the war on Gaza started. They did not subdue after the fragile ceasefire took place in Gaza. On the contrary, people here would tell you that Israel wants to send a message to all Palestinians, wherever they are, that it has the upper hand, it has the control over the lives of Palestinians. And hearing from Palestinians who are in Nablus, to the north of the occupied West Bank, they seem to be under the impression that there's a new commander in one of the Israeli army's divisions who wants to come and show force and remind Palestinians that they live under Israel's military rule, under Israel's occupation, and that they should keep that in mind if they want to think about opposing or resisting Israel's occupation. Also in Jenin, we've seen these raids and how many Palestinians have been in groups detained and arrested by the Israeli forces. Local sources talk about the number 40. And we've been seeing a lot of these mass detentions across the occupied West Bank, again, as a way to remind Palestinians that the Israeli army is still occupying them, still controlling each and every aspect of their lives. But not only that, we're talking about Israeli settlers as well, who are armed, who are continuing to threaten, to intimidate Palestinians, even in their homes.
Meanwhile, Israeli forces have expelled Palestinian families from their homes in Nur Sham's refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. They're preparing to demolish 25 residential buildings. Since January, Israeli forces have razed more than 1,400 buildings in Nur Shams, Tulkarem and Jenin. More than 32,000 Palestinians have been displaced this year, the largest displacement since 1967 when the occupation began. Palestinians say the demolitions are an attempt to change the geography of their land and reshape their identity.